Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. We have a long agenda today. And as everyone knows, we're starting at noon or 12:10 to first address ordinances. And we're going to do that till about 1:15. And I do want to announce a few scheduling changes. We are going to, right after the ordinances, we're going to start with the concession agreement with Boucher Brothers at 1 p.m., which will be followed by the 500 Alton Road CUP at 1:30, and that will be followed by the lot split on South Hibiscus, and then we have a time certain for the Senor Frogs progress report of 3 p.m. and a time certain for the Royal Palm progress report right after that, which should be around 3:30. So those are the announcements to the schedule, and I'll let Nick take it from here on the lobbyist disclosures and everything else.
Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, I'd like to read the city's notice regarding lobbyist registration. If you're appearing on behalf of a business, a corporation, or another person, you need to register as a lobbyist with the city clerk's office. If you haven't registered yet, you should go downstairs and register before you speak to the board. You don't have to register as a lobbyist if you're speaking only on behalf of yourself and not any other party, or if you're testifying as an expert witness, providing only scientific, technical, or other specialized information or testimony in this public meeting, or if you're appearing as a representative of a neighborhood association without any compensation or reimbursement for your appearance, to express support of or opposition to any item. Expert witnesses and representatives of neighborhood associations shall, prior to appearing, disclose in writing to the city clerk their name, address, and the principal on whose behalf they're communicating. If you're an architect, attorney, or employee representing an applicant or an objector, you must register as a lobbyist. These rules apply whether you're appearing in favor of or against an item, or encouraging or arguing against its passage, defeat, modification, or continuance. And Mr. Chair, given that we don't have any quasi-judicial hearings until at least 1 o'clock, I'll wait to swear in the public and staff.
Okay.
I think we're only going to be hearing legislation for the first hour.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Nick. Couple quick things before we get to the ordinances. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting from somebody? Okay. Mark, David, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, those are moved. Okay, requests for continuances or withdrawals. The first one is Planning Board File 19-0259, 224 2nd Street.
Good afternoon. Emily Balter, Burke, Howardell, Fernandez, and Larkin, offices at 200 South Biscayne Boulevard. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, 224 2nd Street, LLC. We made a slight modification to the plans, so we resubmitted on April 26th, Friday, in order to go before you on June 25th, 2019.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Since these were advertised for 1.
Oh, we got to do this at 1? Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
Okay, so we'll request the continuance at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sorry about that.
Someone moved it.
Okay, well then we will move right on to the code amendments. The first is number 5 on the agenda, Planning Board File 19-0272, speakers on Lincoln Road.
Okay, and this starts on page 11 of the board packages. This is an ordinance pertaining to speakers on Lincoln Road, Planning Board File number PB 19-0272. This was referred by the City Commission on March 3rd of this year. What this ordinance does is currently exterior speakers are prohibited on Lincoln Road. This ordinance would allow a restaurant or cafe only to have exterior speakers, provided that the music was played no higher than ambient levels. No other establishments on Lincoln Road would be allowed to have speakers. This also includes pretty strict penalty and enforcement provisions as part of this ordinance. We are recommending that the Planning Board transmit this to the City Commission with a favorable recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Anyone here in the public to speak on this ordinance? No? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Any questions from the board? So it only applies to restaurant established food and beverage
Restaurant or
establishments?
cafe, exactly.
Okay.
If the use
Makes
changes,
sense. So I didn't realize. So up till now, there's no speakers allowed at restaurants on Lincoln Road?
That's correct, yes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Even through a conditional use permit, because I know that we heard a second level restaurant on Lincoln Road, Meridian in Lincoln, and we permitted exterior speakers there through a CUP process.
There was an ordinance amendment in it was either 2014 or 2015 that prohibited speakers. Before that, you had to get a certificate of appropriateness, but that ordinance just banned them outright. some of the restaurant venues got together and said, look, if we can do this in an orderly fashion, we'd like the ability to have speakers on Lincoln Road, subject to the C of A process, but for restaurants only, not for retail or any other use like that. So this would remove that prohibition and allow, under limited circumstances, speakers.
Well, I read through it. I think the restaurants there need all help they can get with the rent they're paying. So, and I think the protections are in place. So unless anyone has any questions for the staff? Someone want to move it?
Inside the restaurant, not outside.
Currently, but this will allow
This will allow speakers outside, subject to them getting a certificate of appropriateness from historic preservation staff or the board to place the speakers outside.
What are the noise restrictions on
That they can't exceed ambient background music levels.
the famous ambient
Yeah,
level.
that was the key word I was looking for, and there it is. So as long as that's the case, I think it'll be something enjoyable for the folks at the cafes. Obviously, if it's not enforced, it'll be bad. So.
Right. Well, code.
Because I think there could be a cacophony of sound going from one restaurant to the next. And I think that's a problem. As you walk down Lincoln Road, you're going to hear these various different levels of music for different tunes, and so I don't know if it's a good idea. I'm troubled by that.
Well, obviously it'll be subject to enforcement, but
Yeah, but
the protections are in place if they're enforced.
Right, they're fines, there's fines if they
Right.
violate the.
I know, but the inherent nature of the speakers, no matter what volume they are, these restaurants are pretty close to one another. So if you have the inherent nature of the music from the speaker, you're going to have a conflict of music as people walk down Lincoln Road. So I find that to be a troubling and distracting circumstance.
What about the people that are renting sidewalk space from the city? Will speakers be able to be placed on city property, or would they need to be affixed to the actual building?
If they were going to have speakers on public property, it would require Public Works approval, depending on the location. So if they can do some type of wireless speaker that's hidden within an umbrella, similar to the same way that you would put a lighting fixture, they might be able to do that. But it would require a Public Works right-of-way permit.
Although there are systems that could be wireless, so
Yeah.
you don't.
And if
Don't
we want it to be
necessarily need to.
ambient, and, there's certain restaurants that have, a large area of coverage on Lincoln Road, then it would have to be a wireless to be ambient. I mean, just back to my concern, I've gone to Segafredo, and I know I'm listening to music at Segafredo. So were they exempt from this because they received their permit prior to that ordinance
They're
in
allowed to have
2014?
speakers, but they're not permitted to play the music above ambient levels. If they're playing above ambient levels, they're in violation.
And then code will enforce that.
How do you define ambient levels?
That you can
Normal
hear,
conversation.
normal conversation won't be
Cannot
interrupted.
interfere with normal conversation.
Well, what about restaurants that are immediately adjacent to one another?
Well, if it's ambient, that shouldn't be an issue.
And by the way, just to interject, I'm just looking at the Sidewalk Cafe ordinance. Live entertainment and speakers are prohibited in the Sidewalk Cafe permit areas unless expressly permitted as in conjunction with a special event permit. So this is more about exterior areas on private property.
I don't have any problem with the interior areas. That's not going to be an issue. But the exterior speakers are definitely going to be an issue. And you're going to have the owners of different establishments complaining that the noise from the other establishment is interfering with their music and vice versa. And you're going to have pedestrians walking down the street listening to a variety of different music, some of which may be objectionable, some of which may be very pleasant. But you're going to just have a noise conflict there, no matter how low the volume of the music is. So I think it's a troubling and unnecessary. You want to sit outside and enjoy a conversation at your restaurant. I don't think you necessarily need music there.
To your point, Nick, I think that the ambient music without a DJ wouldn't trigger entertainment. I stand to be corrected in that case. But as long as it's ambient and it's not associated with the DJ playing, then it wouldn't classify itself as entertainment.
Correct.
So I think it'll end up that they can't put the speakers out there. And I think that the noise levels on Lincoln Road, like on a weeknight, are so high already that the ambient music wouldn't really be heard as much. So it's just, I'm willing to help the businesses succeed. I most certainly see a decline on Lincoln Road as far as prosperous restaurants succeeding, and I see a decline in people patroning, going to those businesses with other areas in the city opening. And I want to make sure that Lincoln Road becomes, a world-class type of destination that attracts tourism and a positive place for the city. I don't think that.
I think that would achieve the contrary result, because you're going to have a huge different cacophony of different noises and different sources of music. The restaurants are adjacent to one another, as I said before, and I think it's a negative, a definite negative.
So let me ask something. Let's say someone wants this to happen, right? And perhaps we let it happen and suggest that this is passed up. Can we say this is sort of an experiment to see? Because if it turns out to be what my colleague has said it might turn out to be, is there a take back here?
You can recommend to the commission that this be in the form of a pilot program, but once the ordinance is changed, then I think in order for restaurants to go in and make the investment, they're probably going to want some assurance that they'll be able to do this. Obviously, if this starts to become problematic, the commission certainly has the authority to further amend the code to prohibit it moving forward if the noise or the sound starts to become an issue.
So Tom, if we make it a pilot, if we recommend that it's a pilot, what would that require, a reconsideration a year from now?
Yeah, it would basically sunset the regulations pending further enactment by the commission, but I'm not sure that we'd be able to structure it to remove what has already been permitted. That is a little bit, you would need a sunset provision in that regard, and that gets a little complicated.
I
So,
think it'd be a
Brian.
huge mistake.
Brian, so thinking about Ocean Drive, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming the businesses are requesting this. The businesses feel they need this. Is that kind of where this is coming from?
That's correct. Yeah, this came through the bid, through some of their members.
This came through the bid. So one bad operator turns it up, the other one feels like, well, I can't compete unless I turn mine up, and then you've got a real tough situation on your hands.
Pandora's
Except
box.
that there's financial penalties unless you are fearing that it won't be enforced.
Yeah, then we're into code enforcement, and so that's really, is there a comfort level that's going to happen? And if so, then I think, obviously ambient music doesn't bother anybody, right? It's when it's supposed to be ambient, but it's not.
Correct.
I think I'd be willing to support it not coming onto the other side of Lincoln Road in the center and try to help the businesses have ambient noise closer to their storefront.
Correct.
I am very concerned about them expanding speakers into their large sidewalk cafe area that sometimes you really don't know where one restaurant ends and the other one begins. And that becomes a very public right-of-way realm. So I think the best place to start is to allow them attached to their storefront, kind of like what we were talking, that Nick had mentioned, but make sure that covers ambient speaker placements as well. I'd just be hesitant.
Look at all
have
the
them set it up.
potential problems. Look at all the potential problems we're just bringing up right now on this issue. Why create a condition that's going to provoke controversy or has the potential to provoke controversy? People are eating outside. They want to talk to one another. They don't necessarily want to listen to music. If they want to listen to music, they can go inside the restaurant, they can, with the doors closed or whatever, and play it as loud as they want. But I believe that people who are sitting outside in the beautiful evenings on Lincoln Road and in the fresh air, especially in the winter, don't want to listen to all these different sources of potentially cacophonous music coming from all different establishments who are all playing different tunes. You're depending on the taste of the disc jockey or whoever's selecting the music.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare waiting to happen.
Although I do respect that the business owners are the ones probably that push for this. So I think that I would trust their judgment probably better than ours as far as
What their
what their
customers
customers, what would be best for their customers. Because if they think that's going to chase away their customers, they'd be the first one to say this isn't the right regulation for them.
When was the last time you went to a restaurant and you chose the restaurant based on the soundtrack rather than the food?
I most certainly want an overall experience at a restaurant. So if it was a restaurant catering to a specific theme and they're trying to create a
Correct.
certain ambient feel, then I do think that music will play to it. What our concern is, of course, is that that turns into entertainment. So I think it needs to be very clear, like a disc jockey, regardless of what level the music's being played, a disc jockey would be considered entertainment and it should not be allowed.
Very
Yeah, that-
slippery
well,
slope.
hold on.
Very
There-
slippery slope.
But there's no, Tom, there's no entertainment allowed. There's no disc jockey. This is just about a
No,
stereo system.
this is strictly recorded music.
Right.
There's no DJs.
Playing
there's
at
no
ambient music
performers.
subject to fines,
Yes.
correct? All right.
Listen, I don't have a problem with supporting it in the sense that I believe that it's thematic for the restaurant. And David, obviously, you can vote the way you want. I think that no different than a paint color or a scheme of a restaurant, that a certain playlist or type of music is kind of, what Daniel said, it kind of goes into the theme of the restaurant. I don't believe that the operator would do this to outplay a neighbor. So I don't think that.
Kareem, I agree with you. I think you could go into a restaurant and have a very satisfactory experience with the music that you're listening to. On the other hand, there may be a restaurant next door or a restaurant 2 doors down that is going to hear this music, and you're going to have a competitive environment you're creating a condition where there'd be a competitive environment among all these different restaurants.
Yeah.
I think it's just asking for trouble.
Well, I think we have the means to enforce it, and should that become an issue. And I just, I'm in support of it, so I'm going to move it if no further discussion.
Can I add one more comment? What is our flexibility, and what does the board feel about a one-year revisit or something along the
Well,
lines of?
as Tom said, once you permit it, it's tough to do that. So,
I would like a friendly amendment if you guys consider it. Number one, clarifying that there is no entertainment that includes a disc jockey. I know staff feels that that's going to be the case, but what wording can we put in here to make it very clear that?
You don't need to put any because.
it's not allowed, right?
It's already
Second-
covered under the
Okay.
definition of
So
entertainment.
the second would be whether the board feels that we should prohibit them being placed on the outskirts of
Well,
the
that would be a
public
different,
cafe.
that would be a different section of the code.
Right, this isn't
And that's what
allowing
our-
that, right?
That's what I cited to earlier. That's already in the code. That,
Right.
That entertainment and speakers are not permitted at sidewalk cafes.
Right,
That's
For
in
sure.
the code.
yeah.
Sidewalk cafes meaning on the public right of way.
All right, so we all know the pros and cons, so let's just move it, and then however you want to vote, let's vote. We got to move on.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
So just to confirm, one nay?
One nay.
One
David's a
Six
nay.
in favor, one nay, okay.
Yeah. Okay, next is Planning Board File 190273, Parking Incentives for Main Use Garages.
Okay, and this report starts on page 20 of the board packages. This ordinance was referred to both the Planning Board and the Land Use and Development Committee by the City Commission on February 13th. On March 6th, the Land Use Committee reviewed the ordinance and recommended that the commission approve the ordinance. What this does is currently within main use garages, the amount of allowable accessory uses are limited to a percentage of the space used for parking. And it's currently limited to no more than 25% of the total garage area of the structure. What this ordinance does is in order to allow for parking alternatives to be used within main use garages and still allow for a reasonable amount of accessory uses, this proposal would increase the percentage of allowable accessory uses based upon the parking reductions associated with alternative parking requirements. This would increase the amount of accessory use from 25% up to 35%. And these included alternative parking requirements include such items as short and long-term bicycle parking, carpool and van pool parking, dedicated drop-off spaces for loading and ride share, parking for scooters, dedicated shower facilities. Currently, all these elements count against somebody who wants to use these alternative parking requirements in a main use parking structure. So that's why they would still be considered part of the accessory elements in excess of the 25%, and that's the reason why we're recommending that accessory amount be increased to 35% for projects that are utilizing a certain percentage of those alternative parking requirements. In addition to that, we've included increases for the allowable percentage for workforce and affordable housing within main-use garages, as well as reducing the parking requirement to 0 for such housing units. So we are recommending that the planning board transmit this to the city commission with a favorable recommendation, and we may have somebody in the audience who generated this request based upon their desire to do such a garage.
So I have a quick question, Michael. In the whereas clauses, I'm just curious where this comes from. One statement says, and I'm all for reducing cars on the road, but the rate of private automobile ownership in the city is diminishing significantly. Where does that come from? Like, how do we know that?
I think that comes from our, you look at our utilization rate for both private and public garages, and it's gone down substantially.
Well, that's the next whereas. There's been a decrease in demand and usage for parking in Miami Beach?
Yes, we found that both in our facilities as well as private garages.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
We have reports submitted, especially for private garages, trying to document that they no longer need the number of parking spaces that the structure was originally built for.
Okay.
My only comment is on I can see this has been added to. This is a section of the code that's just been added to time and time. Again, sometime in the near future might be good to just come back and rewrite it instead of keep on adding to it. It would be helpful because reading this for me was difficult. I had to read it a
The
lot.
commission has actually authorized the city to begin the RFP process to do a resiliency code rewrite. So we're in the process of retaining a consultant for that. And this is one of many sections of the code that obviously needs some surgery in that regard.
So then Town Center, the North Beach Town Center, remember we got rid of for the most part, TC1, TC2,
Yes.
TC3. There is a section that still remains TC3 on the closer to Normandy Isle section, but here, do you want to take this opportunity in section item 9 just to make sure we're referring to the new TCC area and how it applies there, just so we can clean that up here, because we're going to continue to find that as when we changed it to
Which
TCC.
one's that?
I guess page 29 of our package, item 9. And
Well, technically, there still is a TC3 district.
there is, there
So
is to the
because-
west of Town
Yeah,
Center.
because there is a TC3 district, that's why we didn't remove that.
I don't understand.
But I agree, that's one thing that we have to take a look at is, in the code rewrite, is modifying those TC districts and see if that makes sense to include.
Yeah, like 9C references TC1. And again, I'm not asking you to do that here. It's just before it goes to commission, maybe it's just clarifying that just to make sure the intent was, because what's left in TC3 is so minimal.
Well, TC1 as well, there's a very small portion of TC1 left.
Right.
Is there a TC? Oh, it's right, same area on east of Indian,
Yep.
west of Indian Creek, before you hit Normandy Isle. So just please review that before you send it to commission to see if that, just the wording needs to be revised, if in fact you feel that's the case.
Well, that should be a recommendation in our ruling.
I don't think it needs to be revised because the intent of this was not to make a wholesale policy change, but to clarify that section. And since there are TC1, TC3 districts remaining,
Right.
this wasn't meant to do an analysis of those remaining parcels. I think that would
What's-
have to be done as a code rewrite.
So I guess what I'm saying is, what used to be TC1 that became TCC, we're not worried about making sure this applies to what's now known as TCC, since we developed a brand-new
No, because
development code for
that's now,
TCC.
that's now parking district number 8 with a completely different set of regulations.
Thank you.
I have
All
a
right.
question.
Oh, you want to do that before you hear, you want a question on the, go ahead. You want staff?
Just a quick question for Tom, just so I understand, we're going, the proposal is to go from 15 to 20% on the one category and from 30 to 35% on the other.
Well, no, you would be going from 25% to 30%, and then 25% to 35% on the other one if you have the corresponding percentage on the left.
Okay. And is this roughly correlated with what you were just talking about as far as the drop-off in demand? Because I've heard these dramatic numbers as well, as far as the drop-off in demand for parking citywide. Does this roughly correlate there, or is this, is there a relationship there?
I think it's completely independent. The idea here is that for garages that want to take advantage of alternative parking and provide parking for scooters and bicycle facilities, those are penalized now. Those are not actual parking spaces for vehicle.
Right, but we're able to consider this, though, because of the drop-off
I
in
guess because
demand,
more
right?
people are using alternative modes.
Right.
So this allows more
This
alternative
incentivizes
modes.
alternative, but we have the luxury of considering it because parking demand
Yeah,
is
there
falling.
there
right?
is a correlation in terms of this being proposed